Welcome to another edition of the Sundown series, where today we'll be talking about Shively or Shively, Kentucky. Shively or Shively is a home rule class city in Jefferson County, Kentucky, United States, in a suburb of Louisville within the Louisville metro government. As of the 2010 census, the city's population was 15,264, reflecting an increase of 107 or 0.7% from 15,157 in 2000. Following the settlement of Louisville at the Falls of the Ohio in 1778, farms spread out into the nearby countryside. Early landowners include Colonel William Pope, Major Abner Field, and the Shivleys, Christian, William, and Jacob. Christian opened a mill and tavern on the section of his 1,000-acre tract near Mill Creek, in the road later incorporated as the Louisville and Nashville Turnpike, connecting Louisville to the Salt River. This became the focus of a settlement known as the Shively Precinct. He donated the land for a church in 1816 that is now known as Park View Methodist. A stagecoach stop was opened in 1831. The Elizabethtown and Patica Railroad arrived in the 1870s. Shortly before the Civil War, the area became popular among German immigrants, mostly from Bavaria, and they erected St. Helen's Catholic Church in 1897. The community was commonly known as St. Helen's for the next few years, but the post office, established in 1902, could not adopt it owing to another community with that name in Lee County. 8 whiskey distilleries opened nearby after the end of Prohibition. When Louisville began an attempt to annex and tax them during the Great Depression, they talked the residents of Shively into incorporating separately, finalized in May 23, 1938, and annexing their district instead. Their $20 million revenue stream left the small city well funded, despite it becoming the state's fastest growing city during the 1950s as white flight and suburbanization reached Louisville. The area had long-standing de facto segregation as a whites-only neighborhood. In 1954, Black Korean War veteran and electrician Andrew Wade IV and his wife Charlotte, who had found themselves unable to buy a home in a suburban neighborhood due to Jim Crow housing discrimination, and got help from activists Carl and Ann Braden. The Wades selected a house in Shively that they wanted to buy, and the Bradens bought it on their behalf and deeded it over to them. Reading that part sounds so familiar to a story I just recently did. So as you can see, that still goes on today as it did back then. And this happened in a different location compared to the story I talked about, where the black couple had to get their white female friend to do the deed for them, basically. Well, do the appraisal for them. Soon afterwards, the Wade's home was repeatedly attacked, including cross burning on an adjacent lot, rocks thrown through their windows, rifle shots into the house, and ultimately a dynamite bomb that exploded under their daughter's bedroom while they were in the home, although no one was injured. The news made national headlines and was the subject of a 1958 memoir published by Ann Braden called The Wall Between. No one was ever convicted of the crime, and the Bradens were charged with sedition for their actions. Carl Braden was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison, spending 7 months there before state-level sedition convictions were overturned by a U.S. Supreme Court ruling a related case in 1956. After the bombing, the Wades left, and very few other blacks attempted to move in. So you see, the white family, they got punished for aiding this black family. And the community remained a largely white sundown town well into the 1960s. In the 1970s onward, the segregation would erode to the point where Shively now has approximately a 30% black population, according to the U.S. Census record, a greater percentage than in the Louisville metropolitan area as a whole, and more than double the percentage in the U.S. population as a whole. Increased taxes and changing tastes closed most of Shively's distilleries in the late 1960s. Shively's population had gradually declined since reaching 19,223 in 1970. Budget surplus became shortfalls, and Shively tried but failed to annex more suburban territory in Pleasure Ridge Park in 1984. The same year, the town was hit with a scandal when Police Chief Michael Donio admitted to taking bribes and to allow prostitution in the area. Such events led to the community reputation as Lively Shively. Okay, so it is Shively, based on how they wrote that. As the name of the town is pronounced with a long I, this is a rhyme. The area's fortunes have since improved somewhat, with various public work projects occurring and some businesses moving to the area. However, the area along the 7th Street north of Dixie is still known for its seedy adult entertainment businesses. Into the 2000s, the area lagged behind eastern and southern Jefferson County, with one of its few remaining large retail centers, the 150,000 square foot Dillard's on Dixie Highway, closing in 2007 due to slow sales at the location despite the chain's general profitability in the Louisville area. Shively continues to show its strong ties to the bourbon industry. It remains the site of one major operating distillery, Brown Forman's Early Times Distillery, which still produces historic brands, including Early Times, first produced in 1860 and one of the few brands that was allowed to be produced during the Prohibition era, the best-selling whiskey in the country in the mid-1950s, and Old Forester, first produced in 1870, the first bourbon sold exclusively in sealed bottles and the oldest bourbon continuously on the market to present at the time. Another historic Shively distillery site, the former Stitzel Weller Distillery, had been converted into a tourist attraction for the Bullet Bourbon brand and was included as a stop on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2014. As of October 2014, the historic Michter's Bourbon brand is working on opening a new distillery site in Shively. The Burning Distillery, another major distillery, which is the current distillery site for Heaven Hill Distilleries, opened in the neighboring part of Louisville just outside of Shively around 2000. On November 5th, 2018, Democrat Beverly Chester Burton became the first African American to be elected mayor of Shively. Let's see, as the population is 67.26% white, 30.32% African American, 0.26% Native American, 0.42% Asian, 0.78% from other races, and 0.96% from 2 or more other races. Hispanic or Latino of any race were 1.39% of the population. So this is one of the few sundown towns that I have covered since I've started this series last year, where black people make up the majority of the non-white class in that town. And this is like the first time that I think I've done a town where where white people did not exceed 85% of the population. They were 67%. They actually make up a little more than half of the population compared to the black folks that do live there. So this place has a very large black population. Interesting. Well, that pretty much concludes this edition of the Sundown series and concludes our trip to Kentucky. Yes, we are now about to get out of Kentucky, and of course, you know I don't reveal where I'm headed to next until I show a video displaying where we are at. But we will be heading to a different town in a different state next Sunday, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And if you are from Kentucky, live in Kentucky, let me know if any of these stories, these sundown town stories, stuck out to you. Have you heard of any of these towns? Or if you're a trucker and had to drive through any of these towns, let me know what y'all think down in the comments. And I will talk to you in the next one.